Oh man, after Rock-a-Doodle, just about anything actually doesn't seem so bad. Thumbelina was Don Bluth's animated picture in 1994 under Warner Brothers. It's something else that's already been visited by other That Guy with the Glasses reviewers, but I think it's worth looking at again, especially directly after Rock-a-Doodle. I'm serious, I was so disappointed with Rock-a-Doodle after watching it as an adult and not having seen it since childhood, that just about anything was better than it. And frankly, yes, Thumbelina is quite a bit better than Rock-a-Doodle. That's not to say it's amazing or anything, because it's not, but my god is it better than Rock-a-Doodle. The only real problem with the movie is that it's incredibly generic. When you start working with bigger studios, they start wanting to work with a formula that is tried and true. So basically, copy and paste the Disney format. In this case, it didn't work so well, but that's also mostly because that year it had to compete with The Lion King and Batman Mask of the Phantasm, the latter being one of my favorite animated movies, and remains my favorite Batman movie, animated or not, as you can plainly see. It's worth noting that this adaptation of Hans Christian Andersen's story is one of the more relatively accurate adaptations available, and any plot holes that show up are usually the same as those found in the story. Of course, that doesn't actually make the movie feel any better. It still feels stupid in some places, but we'll cover that shortly. Barry Manilow composed the music for this movie, and in fact he was originally signed on to do a trio of Don Bluth movies, but the only other one he ended up composing for was The Pebble and the Penguin. The music mostly isn't bad, in fact a couple of songs are quite good.
Let me be your wings, let me be your only love, let me take you far beyond the stars.
Some people think that the song Marry the Mole is one of the worst musical numbers ever written for a movie.
Dearie, marry the mole.
And yeah, okay, it's pretty bad. But my god, I'd take this over some of the songs in Rock-a-Doodle any day.
Twiddly-dee, twiddly-dee, they're running out, they're running out, they're running out of battery.
Anyway, about the movie, we have Jacquemus, a French bird who believes in overcoming the impossible. He's remarkably similar to the French pigeon in An American Tail. I really wish they hadn't added in this CG, but, well, no taking it back now. The bird tells us the story of Thumbelina. You know how it works, right? An old woman has no children, but then she's gifted with a flower who births a little girl no bigger than her thumb. Yeah, that's the story. The first musical number is probably my least favorite. It could have been better if it weren't for those damned chickens throughout it.
Thumbelina,
She's a funny little squirt.
Thumbelina.
Tiny angel in a skirt.
Well, Thumbelina is displeased that she's the only person her size.
Are there any stories about little people?
What, you mean like Willow? Oh, you mean like really little. Well, she learns about fairies and wishes they were real so that she could have somebody else her size to interact with. I'm rather a fan of the musical number that follows.
After the rain goes, there are rainbows.
Meanwhile, the court of the fairies are flying around, turning summer into autumn. The 16-year-old Prince Cornelius is riding around on his bumblebee when he happens across Thumbelina. Love happens instantaneously.
Anything that you desire, anything at all.
They're already jumping to the big stuff.
Do not forget me.
Forget-me-nots. Oh, I'll never forget you. Never. Will you meet my parents?
And then we'll live happily ever after.
I'm actually curious. A lot of fantasy kingdoms frown upon things like marrying outside of royalty. On top of that, Thumbelina isn't even a fairy. Won't the king and queen have a problem with that? If not, well, cool, that's one tolerant fantasy royal family. But suddenly Thumbelina is stolen away in the middle of the night by Mrs. Toad, who is voiced by none other than Maria del Rosario Pilar Martinez Molina Gutierrez de las Perales Santa Ana Roman Guerra y de los Hinojosa Rastan, better known as Charo. Wow, they look surprisingly similar.
The panes and windows falling with the diapers changing, with the roof chips leaking, and the enchilada spoiling.
See, one of her sons insists that he's in love with her, and so Mrs. Toad insists that Thumbelina marries her son. They then proceed to leave her there alone. Oh, don't worry, so long as she's on this lily pad, there's no way she's going anywhere. Oh, I was wrong. Here comes Giacomo to take her home. Oh, wait, that's what he's doing?
Ah, the shore. You mean if you can reach the shore before you go over the waterfall?
Oh, well, that's no problem, right? Why don't you just pick her up? No? Oh, okay, that's cool.
It's impossible.
Impossible? Nothing is impossible.
Oh, great, now you're gonna take her home.
You don't need a guiding star. Trust your ticker. Get there quicker.
No, see, the heart isn't a very reliable GPS, Giacomo. Now, if you'll just take me home...
Bon voyage, Thumbelina! Never fear! I will find the prince!
Oh, never mind. Okay. She's walking along when a sudden Gilbert Gottfried appears. Actually, he's just about my favorite part in the movie. There are points where you can tell that they just let him ad-lib and then just animated it in. I kinda wish they'd just let him do more of that, and it might have made the movie a little better. He tells Thumbelina she's beautiful and loves her singing voice, so he takes her to go perform at his nightclub, where she doesn't ever sing at all. Okay. Well, her beetle disguise fails and everybody calls her ugly. Giacomo shows up and promises to find the Veil of the Fairies so he can therefore find Prince Cornelius for her. A day passes, and what was once autumn starts becoming winter. Wow. Well, that was one short autumn. Giacomo gets a thorn in his wing, and while the prince is out looking for Thumbelina, he falls into water and then freezes stiff. Thumbelina passes out at some point and is dragged underground by Miss Fieldmouse, who then gently breaks the bad news of the prince's death.
That he was found stone cold frozen dead in the snow.
Thumbelina takes it well.
Knew that.
No. Cornelius? No!
It's soon suggested that she marry her neighbor down the tunnel, Mr. Mole, who just needs some companionship. I mean, he's rich, so it's every girl's dream, right? Well, not Thumbelina's. When walking down the aisle on what seems to be the next day, she realizes that even if the prince is dead, it doesn't matter. She only wants to marry for love. All the while, the prince has been captured in a block of ice, then melted out, and is still fighting for the sake of his love. Giacomo comes along and brings Thumbelina to the Veil of the Fairies, which looks like nothing, until Thumbelina begins singing, and then for a while it still kind of looks like nothing, it just starts looking like spring. Wow, an entire year seems to have passed in the course of about 4 days. Thumbelina and the prince get together, Thumbelina sprouts wings, somehow, and finally...
They lived happily ever after.
Again, there's really not much terribly wrong with this movie. It's just incredibly bland, predictable, and uses storytelling that's been long overused by other studios. The animation, again, is really quite beautiful, and at times uses old lighting tricks from black and white romance movies. And while Don Bluth has always been really good at animating animals, I have always loved the fluidity of his human animations. If any of it is rotoscoped, it's a little less noticeable than, say, stuff animated by Ralph Bakshi, and that's what leaves it still feeling like a cartoon, kind of just the way I like it. If you turn your brain off for this movie, you might even be able to enjoy it for a few minutes. It's one of Bluth's more forgivable pieces from the 1990s, but there's still a couple more from this decade to tackle. A Troll in Central Park is coming up next.